Selectman Mills to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you, sir?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion for the approval of the minutes of February 19th.
So moved. Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. This time, we offer the opportunity for the members of the audience to bring us new public business, that is, business that's not already on the agenda. If you have something you'd like to bring to the Selectmen's attention, now is the time. Mr. Bradstreet, would you please join us?
Bill Bradstreet, town meeting member. There's an article in the Boston Globe dated January 14th. In it, it is addressing the 1933 law. That was when Prohibition ended, and our legislature is now trying to deal with updating it. I was hoping that it might be possible for us to have our representatives pass on some,
Yes, it is, dear, thanks.
what I think is pertinent information for changing this. And one in particular is the fact that we have liquor licenses. In a sense, we lease them to businesses. Some location specific, some not. And my feeling's always been that when the license is no longer wanted or needed, it should be returned to the town because it's only being leased. Business doesn't own it. For them to sell a license that they don't own, I think is wrong. We had a former selectman years ago, John George, felt the same way. And I think it would be nice if we would tell the legislature that we need a change that's favorable to us. I know we don't sell licenses, but if a business can sell a liquor license for over $100,000 and make a profit on something that they don't own, they merely lease it. Again, I think there's something's wrong. I think it's about time that the state did the right thing and changed it. I'm only talking Danvers for about $100,000. There are other communities in the state that licenses are sold for considerably more. I hope it makes sense to you. If it doesn't, please ask me a question.
I think that through the years of working with the board members, there's varied opinions on that.
Yes.
I am of the opinion that it is a town asset
Yes.
and shouldn't be sold for a profit, but I've been, others have demonstrated their desire to consider it, and there's been legal precedent set that it is a business asset. So I'm not sure what you're asking us to petition our legislation to do, that we commonly can come together and recommend.
I understand you're saying that it's a business asset, but it's a business asset that the business does not own. The town has control of it. And I think if you ask our legislature, our representatives to address that, either one way or the other, but address it, the fact that the license falls under the town's control. Whether it's a business asset or not, it's controlled by the town. If someone wanted to sell it, it should be the town. I don't want the town to sell a business license. I would like the town to issue or lease a license, per se, to a responsible business. Someone who doesn't have deep pockets, but has a good idea. I mean, for someone to have to pay over $100,000 for a liquor license to open a nice restaurant, I don't think is fair. The person or the group that's trying to get started, as opposed to somebody, say, from out of state who has more money than I'll ever see buy a license. My feeling.
Understandable.
I'd appreciate it if the town would consider asking the legislature if they would at least consider the opinion of some of the people in Danvers.
Certainly. What I'll do now is I'll take it under new business, and the board can discuss what direction we'll ask the town manager for.
All I'm asking is that it be discussed.
Great. Be happy to.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, I've urged many times that 1933 law be reviewed by the legislature. It was written at a time when the state was trying to control the city of Boston, the number of licenses they could have, trying to control the drinking, excuse me for saying this, of the Irish. And it was blatant. But the legislature hasn't had the wherewithal to address that 1933 law as long as I've been a selectman. And I've asked many times that we ask our state rep to come on board, and he doesn't. So it's,
What would be the will of the board? I mean, you know my position on this. I respect that others have differing positions, so it wouldn't be a unanimous direction.
so inasmuch as we don't act on new business immediately, if maybe next week when you have a conversation, see if there's a consensus of the board and what
Sure.
direction to take, might be appropriate,
Okay,
is my thought.
we'll take it up at the end of the meeting under past business. And in the interim, if the town manager wants to reach out and find out what the current direction is of legislation, maybe it dovetails with what the board would want anyhow. And we would just ask for the representatives to support that. Thank you. Is there any other new business that's not on the agenda someone wants to bring to our attention? Hearing none. The next agenda item is a public hearing will be held on the application of the Hardcover Inc., doing business as Hardcover, 15A Newbury Street. Denise E. Boggs, manager, for a change of manager, officers, ownership interests, and stockholders at that location. Mr. Clerk, would you speak to this?
Yes, I'll speak briefly to this application, Mr. Chairman, and then a member, a representative of the ownership group of the hardcover will approach the podium and pick up where I left off. A few meetings ago, we approved the new manager, Denise Boggs, the change of manager from Bruce Canario to Denise Boggs. The board approved it and signed the necessary papers. We sent the papers into the ABCC for their approval. And during their review, to make it short, the ABCC found some issues within their files that should have been addressed, names and changes of offices or whatever. So what they did, they remanded the whole action back to the board for your approval and the proper paperwork to be filed, which you have before you this evening. And I can concur that Denise Boggs is has been voted on as the new manager. The rest of the ownership details, to the best of our knowledge, are complete now for the ABCC's liking. And the representative of ownership can concur and give you an updating from their perspective.
Thank you very much. Sir, would you like to speak to this? If you go to the podium, we are televised, and if you could speak into the microphone and introduce yourself.
My name's Bill Swanson. I'm one of the owners of the hardcover with my partner, John Desi. We bought the hardcover from the previous owner in May of 1990, almost 29 years ago. We have had changes of managers. This particular problem has never come to our attention. When it did, I spoke to the person at the ABCC. He went to, I guess it's the Attorney General's office to see what the Attorney General had. The Attorney General had the correct papers with John and I as owners and Bruce Grassfield as being bought out. He told me that they were taking care of it. We were sent a query report, I guess, or approval for them to do a query report on myself and John. We filled those out, we sent it back, and pretty much that's where we stand right now. So we're just trying to get this squared away. I mean, we have owned it, we own other restaurants. We basically took over Bonsider Management Corporation, which was a whole restaurant company in 1990. Before that, we worked for the previous owner for many years. So we're just trying to get all the paperwork correct at this point.
Mr. Clerk?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I can concur, over the last few years, we have had change of managers before the board, and the board has successfully acted on those approvals, and it never came, this issue never came to light during those paperwork, so we're a little bit...
We also had it at 3 other restaurants in Massachusetts. We had one in Burlington, which we filed for a change of managers, here, which we had, and Beverly. And every time when we sent it in, it's always been John and I are 50/50 partners, and it just came to light in this particular thing. So we're just trying to get it squared away. That's really what
So
we're
it appears to be paperwork. The town believes the application is correct and fulfilled. We all have always treated it as such. Sounds like the Attorney General thinks similarly, and now we're just getting ABCC up to speed.
correct.
Yes, we were unaware of any other difficulty or inconsistency in the information.
Turn it over to the board. Selectman Mills, do you have any questions, sir?
No, yeah, I don't know how you guys can do that for 30 years. I worked in a restaurant for 11 years going through school. That's hard work, and you have a great place, so,
Thank you very much.
yeah, you must put in a lot of hours.
It's worth it.
Okay.
Selectman Lallies?
So is it the Board of Directors, is that what was off on this? And do we get a certificate of good standing from the Secretary of State that, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know, I think the ABCC's got a major screw up here. There's no way that they could be doing all of this if everybody's filing your report, you file your annual report every year, it makes no sense, so.
As I've indicated, there's some confusion somewhere at the ABCC,
Yeah.
and this was all news to everybody. And as I said, a few years ago, we did have a change of manager at the hardcover, and it never surfaced. And these gentlemen indicate that their ownership group has been in place since 1990. So
Yeah, it makes
it's
no sense.
there's something there that caused some sort of inconsistency with the information.
And like I said, when we talked to the ABCC, the Attorney General's office has everything correct.
So if I were you, because when you go through sale, we all know what can happen there, I would ask for both the Attorney General and ABCC to issue you a letter that you are in compliance, or just a piece of advice.
Sure.
Selectman Bennett?
Very confusing, no questions.
Selectman Clark?
When I first saw this, I was worried that there was going to be a change of ownership, because you guys have done a great job there and in Beverly. I know, and I've had relatives work for you indirectly. We won't say who, because they're no longer there, but that they had a very good experience working for you. And I'm very much in favor of this. I'm sorry that you had the mess up, and I see how bureaucracy can, some person in Boston made a mistake or transferring information and didn't do it correctly, or it wasn't carried forth, so.
I have no questions other than to offer the opportunity to make sure everything's right from our perspective. So this is a public hearing. Is there any member of the public wish to speak on this issue?
Make a
Seeing
motion,
none?
we close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion made and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion on this application.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chairman, we've already approved the manager. Are we approving her again, or just the change of offices?
Mr. Clerk?
That was a question that myself and my assistant had, and we felt that a vote to have the change of manager would be to ratify what had.
To ratify what we did before. Okay, thank you.
Entertain a motion.
Move to approve the application as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good luck with your paperwork.
Thank you very much.
Agenda item number 4, the board will vote to accept a gift from Kiwanis of Danvers in accordance with MGL Chapter 44, subsection 53A. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not believe that we had the paperwork on this in time for your packets,
Oh, it came today, though, with our,
but I can tell you this is it's a $1,000 donation from Kiwanis in support of the natural playscape that several pieces of which were purchased or authorized in last year's budget, and this would be to continue developing the natural playscape outside of the carriage house. People are probably familiar with the large, we had a tree fall years ago, and rather than take it away, they laid it on its side, and it became a very popular place for the kids to crawl around. It's rotting out, and the Director of Natural Resources, Chris Sanborn, found a company that manufactures a synthetic, it's a cement product that looks like wood, and so they have an idea to create sort of a natural playscape there, and Kiwanis thought that was a neat idea and wanted to support that.
hey, do you want something about this?
No, it's, if I may.
Yeah, no, please.
I mean, Kiwanis's mission is to support children in the community. And this certainly goes a long way to fulfill our mission of supporting children in our community. So I'm sure it's a nice-sized donation from the club.
And I think for disclosure, we'll just say 2 of us are members of Kiwanis.
You can say that. Although I didn't vote on this, I'm not on the
Well,
board of
you could say
directors.
3 of us are, if you want.
3 of us, you
Kiwanis?
could. She is.
I just
I'm
don't go to
sorry,
meetings.
I apologize, my mistake.
I can't get out for lunch.
3 of us. So, Selectman Langley, you're up at bat. Anything to say on this?
No,
Okay?
it's a good idea.
And Ms. Bennett, you've already said your piece, and Mr. Clark,
I think it's a fantastic idea, and thank the Kiwanis Club for their cooperation.
and Mr. Mills.
I'm very fond of the Kiwanis and their activities, and this is another example of how much they do for this town.
When are you going to join?
You going to take me to lunch the first time?
I'd be happy to.
Okay, then maybe I'll do that, Dan.
I understand when they invite you, they don't invite me, they don't want the farmers on there.
It's at night, you're asleep.
Be careful.
Yeah. I have no other comments. So I'll entertain a motion on this agenda item.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Obviously, a
Send a
letter of
letter?
thanks. Yeah, letter of thanks will go along with that. Should go with that being said. All right. At this time, the board will hear the fiscal year 2018 audit report by the town's independent auditor.
Mr. Chairman, I'll introduce Scott McIntyre, who's making his way to the podium, and also Corey Grace, our town accountant, who's in the audience tonight. I won't steal all of Scott's thunder, but the opinion on page 14 does certify that we had a clean audit this year, which of course is the most important line in the entire 140-page document, and you can stop reading then and there, but it is chock full of useful and important information. And I think Scott is eager to share some highlights with the board and then take questions after that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Town Manager. I was actually going to start on page 13. 13, 14, and 15, as was aforementioned, is our opinion on your financial statements. And, you know, your financial statements are this comprehensive annual financial report. There's a wealth of information in there, and I think as the board is certainly aware, the town submits this comprehensive annual financial report to I'll call it an oversight or a professional organization called the GFOA, or the Government Finance Officers Association. You submit this to that organization, and they put it through a test, which involves review by 3 to 4 people from across the country, and it's judged as to whether or not it meets their high standards of excellence in financial reporting. In the past several years, the town has received that certificate of achievement, and I know that the town has submitted this again for review to that organization called the GFOA, and the town and our firm expect that you will again receive the certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. But as was pointed out before on page 13, 14, and it goes on to 15, that is our opinion. It tells you a little bit more than just what our opinion is. It tells you about the audit standards that we followed in developing our test work, in applying our audit procedures to your accounting records. And as was mentioned, in our opinion, your financial statements are totally in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles here in the United States for local governments. Following that are what we call your MD&A, or Management's Discussion and Analysis. It's pages 16 through 26. It's a great resource to go back to at a later point in time to understand why certain key account balances may have changed. That takes us, in going through the document, to page 27. On page 27 is what we refer to as your long-term perspective balance sheet. We'll get to the short-term perspective, which is really your general fund, in a minute. But on page 27, again, the long-term perspective balance sheet includes all of your long-term assets, and probably most importantly in this time, your long-term liabilities. With this perspective on page 27, much of the focus on this reporting is on 2 accounts. If you can focus on that first column of numbers, about 2/3 of the way down, you see in the non-current liability section, you see a net pension liability of $66 million and a net OPEB liability of $164 million. Those are 2 long-term liabilities that Danvers has as of June 30, 2018. Quick word on the net OPEB liability. You know, in fiscal year 18, you implemented a new accounting standard prior to fiscal year 18, you were incrementally bringing that liability on the books. Well, standards changed, and the standard setters said, bring the entire liability on the face of your balance sheet in fiscal year 18. So that liability jumped up significantly over the prior year. What does it all mean? Collectively, those two liabilities, you are a little bit over $130 million. That's why your bottom number in that first column of information, you see that it's in parentheses, your total net position on this perspective. We'll get to the general fund in a moment. But on this perspective, you see a deficit position of that $113 million. It's because of the unfunded pension liability and the unfunded OPEB liability. Now, just to put each of those in a little bit of perspective, you are on a funding schedule for your pension liability. I think it's scheduled to be funded in 2036. So that, no?
2035.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. No, that's important. We think there's a responsibility to highlight these liabilities, but we try to put them in perspective, and that pension liability does have a funding schedule. The OPEB liability, and if, just want to make sure the board is aware that OPEB is OPEB, it's an acronym for Other Post-Employment Benefits, and by other, they mean benefits other than pension, and most specifically, that means retiree health care. The town has set up a trust fund to begin funding that liability. It's got several $1 million in it, but as you can see, even after accounting for those several $1 million, the town does have a net OPEB liability of $164 million. You know, Danvers is not alone. This is not a Danvers issue. These issues exist all over the Commonwealth. So, there is a tremendous amount of disclosure in your footnotes in this CAFR, both dealing with the net pension liability and your net OPEB liability. Everything from discount rates to asset allocations and things like that. I will stop there, and I'll move on to talk about the general fund and some more current financial statements as opposed to the long term. But between the note disclosures, and I will try to answer any questions that the board may have on those two long-term liabilities.
Board, any questions on OPEB and pension liabilities?
No, I hate it on the books. It doesn't look pretty.
I don't understand it all, but I know that tomorrow some good citizen who's watching tonight is going to say, do you mean that we are $113 million behind, and where are we going to ever catch up to make that, to make the liability go away?
Yeah, well, as I indicated on the pension side of things, you are on that funding schedule. Of 2035, you are scheduled to become fully funded. That's, I think, a little bit more rapid than required by state law. On the OPEB side, you're putting some money into a trust, but Danvers is not unlike most communities where they are really dealing with that as a pay-as-you-go liability. From a credit rating standpoint, these liabilities are somewhat new to your balance sheet. The pension liability first surfaced about 4 years ago. And as I mentioned earlier, the net OPEB liability jumped up significantly this year with the implementation of the new standard. But credit rating agencies and financial institutions always knew those liabilities were there. They were always disclosed somewhere maybe around page 85 or 100 in your financial statements, where most readers probably don't read into that deep into your document. But credit rating agencies and financial institutions have always known that those liabilities were there. So it's not as if the presence of them being relatively new is really having a significant impact in the credit rating standpoint. But sir, back to your question, I do understand it, and it is something that communities grapple with these days.
Well, I guess it's something that I have to ask my board members and the town manager of how do we respond to citizens that say, do you mean we're really $120 million in the hole? What's the liability? It's something that you owe.
David, I can offer
Yeah.
a partial answer that Scott is not by law allowed to offer you on this particular topic, but On page 27, the pension liability, the $66 million, that's a real number. We're about 61% funded in our pension. The state has passed laws mandating when and how communities will fully fund their pension obligations. So as Scott indicated, by law, you have to have your pension fully funded in Massachusetts by 2040. The Danvers Retirement Board has taken steps to accelerate that to 2035. A couple of things on the OPEB side. So when Scott mentioned that we're on track to be fully funded on our pension, what a number of communities have done once the pension system is fully funded is redirect the required contributions toward pension to the OPEB, and that's when that liability starts to be reduced at a more accelerated rate. But I think more broadly and more importantly than that, the cost of health care is something that's being discussed at the federal level. It's something that's being discussed at the state level. We've had two consecutive governors who have expressed a need to reform the health care system as a priority. Neither of, Governor Patrick didn't tackle that. Governor Baker has not proposed a bill yet. But that number, that $164 million number, is a function of what we think healthcare is going to cost 30 years from now. There may be systemic changes between now and then that will impact that number. There may be changes to the way that our benefit system here in Danvers is structured that could impact that number. But from a financial management perspective, we're much more focused in 2019 on that pension number because that's a real number. We recognize that we need to grapple with the OPEB number, but I don't think it's as urgent an issue from our perspective right now as the pension figure.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, I'm old enough that it's going to be your problem, not mine, because I'll be dead. But I hate to leave business undone, when I go.
Well, then leave us your money.
David, it
We
took us
accept-
30 years to get into this hole. It's going to take them 30 years to get out of it. You and I won't have to worry about it.
I will say a lot of very well-run towns have decided that they're simply going to pay what they owe each year on that particular line and not worry about that number. I mean, I've worked in communities that have been receiving budget and CAFRA awards for decades that have drawn the conclusion that they'll deal with each year's expense when it comes, but they don't believe in that 50-year number, so they're not going to lose sleep over it right now. So that's an option. The rating agencies may not like that, but that's an option.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions about pensions and OPEB, please?
I just think that this is one of the reasons when people say, oh, we should be doing this, we should be doing that. And I think for as long as we've all been on the board, our town managers have been very conservative about hiring new people, keeping the numbers of town employees to a minimum if possible because of this increasing commitment to the retirees after they retire. And we have to realize this is one of the biggest obstacles we have. And it's one of the biggest reasons why when someone suggests, oh, it would be great to have 2 more firefighters, it would be great to have, extra people working in recreation or wherever. But in reality, it's got to be paid for, and it may have to be paid for future generations, and their ability to pay for that. Insurance is going up, people are living longer, and it's getting to be a greater responsibility. So we just have to be very, I think, targeted on what we're doing in the present to look out for the future. And David, I wouldn't lose that much sleep about this, but I think it's something we always can hold up for those people who want to see the town as having an unending supply of money to hire new people or have new programs. We just got to be very, very judicious, as we have been for the past 20 or 30 years in this town. This is my take on it.
Thank you. Any other questions on pensions and OPEB? Please
If I could
continue.
then ask you to turn your attention over to page 30. Page 30, and the focus here is going to be on the first column of numbers, your general fund. By and large, this is the first place that most readers are going to turn, and they're going to focus in that first column of numbers. It's about the third number up from the bottom. It's your unassigned fund balance. They'll look there, and they'll look at the total fund balance, the second number up from the bottom. The total fund balance being $22.2 million. That's up about $500,000 over the prior year. The unassigned fund balance, again, that represents about 8.5% of your expenditures. It is down a little bit, is down about $2.5 million over your June 30, 2017 balance, and that was driven by free cash that was used for capital articles, both in fiscal year 18 and in fiscal year 19. Above that is your assigned fund balance of a $7.8 million. Really two pieces in that number. It's one piece is what I just mentioned is some free cash that was used for capital articles. That money is assigned for those purposes, so it's reported up there. And the second piece that's included in that assigned fund balance is just your general reserve for encumbrances, some appropriations that were carried forward into early fiscal year 19 and honored at that point in time. And the committed fund balance of about $5.6 million, that balance is essentially unchanged. It's very similar to the prior year balance. Much of that is what I mentioned earlier as far as the capital articles. There are certain specific appropriations for specific purposes. Money that may have been unspent as of June 30, 2018 is committed for those particular purposes and is honored in future years. So that those unspent capital articles are shown as a committed fund balance. So again, that unassigned fund balance, while it is down, it is still at a level that represents about 8.5% of your fiscal year 18 expenditures. In the total fund balance, that is the $22.2 million, represents almost 22% of your general fund expenditures. So I think if someone was to look at your balance sheet here, they would see a very liquid balance sheet with $22.2 million in fund balance that is either committed for purposes, assigned for purposes, or remains unassigned. One last piece on the unassigned, there's really two components to that unassigned fund balance of $8.8 million. There's what we would refer to as the town's true general fund, and that has a balance of about $7.8 million, and then your general stabilization. It's accounted for separately in the town accountant's general ledger, but for reporting purposes, it's combined here in the general fund. That's about $1 million. So the general fund piece, that is the starting point for the Department of Revenue certifying free cash, is about $7.8 million, and then your general fund, your stabilization fund is about $1 million, and those two pieces make up the $8.8 million that you see there in that first column of numbers, third number up from the bottom. From a budgetary performance standpoint, for fiscal year 18 as a standalone fiscal year, if you turn your attention over to page 34, this is generally referred to as the budget and actual comparative schedule. And the focus here is on that last column of numbers. About halfway down the page, you see total revenues and other sources came in just over $1.5 million, greater than anticipated or greater than the budget called for, with about nearly 50% of that coming from excise taxes and the auto registrations here in Danvers. And we've continued to see that in most of our clients across the Commonwealth. On the expenditure side, about two-thirds of the way down, you see the total expenditures and other uses has a favorable variance of about $1.5 million as well. And you can see the various functions. Some is from the general government, some about $500,000 is in public works. You can see the functions that had unspent appropriations associated with them. So the combination of the $1.5 million on the revenue side and the $1.5 million on the expenditure side give you the subtotal there of $3 million. It's almost $3.1 million. Again, on that last column of numbers on page 34. For positive budgetary results of operation. That, however, though, is softened because the town voted to use certified free cash for the various articles that I mentioned earlier. So those positive budgetary results of almost $3.1 million is softened a little bit by the planned use of free cash for capital articles. Following that page, there's some pages on your enterprise funds. Oh, and there is one last page I would like to turn your attention to, is over on page 39. The GFOA, again, that organization which you sent your CAFR to, made a nice suggestion for improvement, although I'm not sure, you had to follow it, but I'm not sure it's much of an improvement. And when I point it out to you, hopefully it will make sense. That first column of numbers on page 39, that is a combination of your contributory retirement, the Danvers contributory retirement system, and your OPEB trust fund. The GFOA suggested that they be combined into a single employee trust fund in the presentation here. So personally, I mean, I don't make the rules, the GASB makes the rules. I like seeing them separate on this page. I think it drew a clearer distinction between the amounts of the assets and the net position of these funds that was reserved for pension versus reserved for OPEB. Now, that detail exists, but you've got to go into the footnotes in your financial statements. If you're interested, that's on page 65 and 66. But in the end, this is a single combination, single column that includes the Danvers Contributory Retirement System as well as the town's OPEB trust fund. Again, following this is a wealth of information and footnotes. I mentioned earlier, you know, a wealth of information on OPEB, pension. I talked about the long-term perspective basis of accounting, and then to the general fund. There's pages in here that reconcile the two bases of accounting that your primary financial statements are based on. I would like to speak for a minute on a couple of management letter comments that we did make for the town, and then I will try to answer any questions that the board may have. In the management letter, I'm going to begin on page 3. We just have a couple of comments this year that we want to draw to the board's attention. The first one is a repeat of the prior year to establish a more formal timeline for closing procedures. As we discussed a little bit last year, you know, when we came in to begin our field work, some of the key reconciliations were still being performed. It was several months after year end. Some of the areas dealt with transfers, receivables, and your overall cash reconciliation. We're suggesting that you implement a formal timeline so that these reconciliations, there's something to go to and see and help ensure that these key accounts are reconciled. In the end, I want to make sure I'm very clear about this. They all got reconciled, but we would urge the town to have these done a little bit more timely and not necessarily as the audit is taking place. It goes towards the completeness of the closing process and really can, you know, even add to a more smooth audit if these procedures are done not while field work is taking place. So in the end, the recommendation is to establish a timeline to ensure that these key reconciliations are occurring during the year and not, you know, 60, 90 days after year end.
And Scott, if I could jump in, we'll be having our budget workshop here Saturday morning, and that will be a topic that we can discuss as part of the budget process. So that's a comment from the auditors that we completely agree with, and Corey and the finance director, Ron Conley, have a plan, and we'll talk about that as part of the budget.
The second issue at the bottom of page 3 is somewhat related, but we wanted to basically have it as a standalone recommendation, and it deals with tax receivable reconciliations between the general ledger and the tax collector. By and large, what we found that this was taking place just at year end and not periodically throughout the year, and doing it periodically throughout the year. Monthly would be great, quarterly would be okay. Most places just do it on a quarterly. I would love to see monthly, but we certainly at least would like to see it done on a quarterly basis. So we're recommending that, you know, a formal, where there's some documented oversight and documented reconciliation between the balances that exist in the general ledger and the actual detailed list of names for unpaid various receivables is done on a quarterly basis. With that, that's a very, very quick walkthrough of our audit process. In general, as I said before, even given that we are making some recommendations to streamline the process a little bit, our audit went very well. And we spoke about it, pension and OPEB. I can speak for hours on that if the board would like. When I look at the town's general fund balance sheet, that $8.8 million is a solid unassigned fund balance. And again, it represents about 8.5% of general fund expenditures, which is, again, a solid position for your general fund. So, with that, I'll try to answer any questions that the board may have.
Corey, is there anything you'd like to offer from your professional capacity? Okay. as I know she loves this stuff, I'm going to offer Diane the opportunity to ask questions first.
I have a confession. I've been a little busy and didn't open the book till tonight, so I've already apologized.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, that's all right. I admit everything anyways, but I'm really glad that he went over the OPEB, and I still struggle with seeing it on the balance sheet, the way they had us bring it on. It doesn't tell the true story. David, the best answer to tell people about it is to come to the budget meeting. We explain every year what we're putting in, where we stand exactly, and they do a great job. So I think that's where we should be. I'm kind of, I missed what you were saying about the second thing, the timely reconciliations. I'm glad we're going to address that. That's always a great thing to do. But you said the receivables on a quarterly basis. I wasn't understanding what you were talking about, that your recommendation.
What we're really referring to there is, we always think about control accounts in detail. The general ledger would maintain a control account, a single count for the entire, as an example, 2019 real estate receivable. That's one number in the general ledger. And the tax collector maintains the detailed list of the taxpayers. And what we're looking to do, what we're suggesting that the town do, is on a quarterly basis, formally document that single number in the general ledger matches the sum of all of the detailed properties of unpaid taxes in the tax collector's detailed records.
And Don, if I could jump in for just a second. One trick of the trade when you get a management letter is to simply say that the responses that we'll evaluate it in the coming year. You see that in a lot of audit responses. In our case, Jamie Colon, who's our assistant town accountant, and Jill Summit, who's our assistant treasurer collector, are already meeting, I believe monthly. And so this was something when Scott and his team brought it up in the fall, instead of waiting, we started doing that. So it's actually been a great recommendation, and I think what we're going to find is that Jill and Jamie will be able to identify hiccups throughout the year rather than, as Scott indicated, waiting until the fall when the audit is taking place to be trying to do a full reconciliation. So Scott is saying quarterly would be kind of a minimally acceptable outcome, and I think we're going to insist that on a monthly basis we do these reconciliations between the collector's office and the accounting department.
Reconciliations are truly the best, except some software lets you hit a button that says figure it out or put it someplace else, which is always fun to get those reports. The last thing is, we have been asked about our enterprise fund, the electric department, and that said that we possibly might not be spending our reserve funds appropriately. And in your writings here, is this confirming that we are in fact appropriately spending all reserve funds, that we have not misused any funds?
I certainly don't think there's been any misuse of the funds. What was the word you used?
I was trying to be careful, so.
Diane, if I could, I'm going to keep jumping in over Scott here, but the electric department has their own independent audit.
Yeah.
So Scott's team certainly is involved with aspects of the electric audit, but there's a separate audit. In addition to that, the Municipal Light Board, within the last month or so, completed an efficiency audit where they asked a third party, not their independent auditor who does their annual audit, to come in and evaluate some of those questions. Once that report is finalized and I have copies, we'll be sharing that with the board and putting it on the website. One teaser recommendation is actually that we may find that our reserves are not sufficient in comparison to many other municipal light plants. As we've discussed many times throughout the budget process and when this question has come up, the volatility that you see in a utility department is significantly different. I mean, our main funding source is the property tax, which is a very reliable and predictable revenue source. But on the electric side, the power markets and the weather and the climate introduce a lot of volatility that you don't see on the property tax side, which is why reserves typically and appropriately are much higher on the utility side. Because if you get a contract that, if there's a defaulted contract in conjunction with unpredicted weather, you may have a situation where you're suddenly millions of dollars short, and rather than having a roller coaster rate, you want to have reserves in place to address that. Sure. So it was a good process, and like I said, we'll have that report available to the board and on the website.
That's good. Thank you. I mean, I go by the fact that everybody just says the service they get from the electric department is top-notch, and that's usually how I rate what we do. But when somebody makes a comment like that, I take it very personal, and just would like that answered. So it sounds like we will be able to answer that, so thank you.
What's that?
Thank you for your presentation, too. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Selectman Bennett?
Thank you. Scott, you answered a number of my questions from page 30, 34, et cetera, but I would like to turn to page 59, long-term debt. And my comment is, I like to see everything broken down here on our debt, the amount of the original issue, the interest rate, the amount outstanding. We tend to show our debt with color graphs, and when I look at it, all I see is a beached whale in different colors and in different throes of suffocating. So I really appreciate this breakdown so I can really analyze what our debt is and when it'll be paid. And on page 61, I may draw attention to the town reports that 59% of the government debt is being repaid over the next 10 years. And that's actually up from last year. Last year was 57%. So I don't know if we're accelerating any payments or we just enough dropped off this past year to change that percentage. But close to 60% of our current debt to be paid off in 10 years, I think is, from my point of view, a good thing.
That certainly is a criteria that the credit rating agencies do look at. It's not, they don't always look at, I'm sure they do look at how much debt a community has, but I think the way they most frequently look at it is how rapidly is it being paid off, and they usually use a measure of 10 years. And as you pointed out back on page 59, you know, it's predominantly, you know, the relatively recent school debt is still outstanding for a period of time greater than 10 years, and actually a significant portion of that debt will be outstanding for a period of time greater than 10 years. And so that probably actually makes your 59% lower than it would have been. I mean, that school debt is sort of isolated in
Yeah, we took it
term.
on for 25
Absolutely.
years, yes.
Absolutely.
It'll look different next year when Smith School's online as well.
I'm sure it will. But again, I appreciate this amount of detail on the debt. Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
That's it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
Just have 2 points. One is, and thank you very much, Scott, for your presentation, as usual. I'm very happy, Corey, that you're here tonight, because I think this is the ease of what's happened here, and what we see is a result of you and your department's hard work all year long. And I regret that you're kind of underappreciated, I think, in the town the last few years. And I don't like the fact that your department, your position has been lowered away from us now 2 generations, because I still feel by the town charter, you should be answering to us and not the town manager. And I'll continue to feel that way till I'm out of office, or the town manager act is changed, or the town's is changed. The town manager did enlighten me about something. I was talking last week or week before with him about it, and I was commenting about the fact that we have all these automobile dealerships in town, and they're not really contributing well to our community. And you've shown it here, and we'll see it later on in the report, the financial report. The excise tax is a huge benefit there. And I never realized that all these car leases that are being written by the auto dealerships, the excise tax for those cars come back to us, not to go to the other towns. That's a huge piece of money, and it's a real benefit that we're getting secondarily from those auto dealerships, because so many cars are leased today. But I appreciate all your work, and thank you.
Selectman Mills?
No comments. Nice job. Thank you.
As always, I'm thrilled with the details here. I especially like the last couple of appendices or chapters. Really gives a good snapshot of the town's finances, and I rely on it a lot through the course of the year. And I thank you. I also appreciate that the recommendations in here are not based on gaps or problems, but opportunities of improvement, which is important. I realizing that you serve many communities, I appreciate that you can't speak comparatively between the different communities, but since I've been on the board, I can't recall a management letter that has had a glaring error or concern, more opportunities to make things more streamlined, more transparent, and in many cases, we wholeheartedly embrace them. So I thank you for your time and your work here. Are there any other questions? Mr. Bradstreet, you're a constant joy to have with us. Is there any questions you have?
Not at this point.
All right, there's no other.
Chairman, I'll share a couple of observations that Scott didn't
Sure.
make, because I think you're related to some of our local policies or conversations we've had that I think are kind of illustrative. Scott spent some time pointing on page 21, which is sort of an overview of where our reserve positions are. And we talk a lot about our unassigned fund balance. In 2016, the board adopted a policy to try to maintain that fund balance at between 8 and 12% of net operating revenue. The number did drop this year, as Scott indicated, and that was in part by design. We had a strong free cash number last year, and we were able to move a sizable amount of our free cash into some of our committed reserves for things like the Smith School. So we expected that number to drop. And as Scott indicated, the total fund balance, which is a separate number that we have a policy for, our stated policies that will keep that number north of 15% actually went up a little bit from year to year. So some of that money was moved from the more liquid areas to the less liquid areas by design. We know, and we'll be talking Saturday, the budget is going to be tight this year. We're going to be within $25,000 of the levy limit. We were about $80,000 from the levy limit last year. We're pulling back on some of the warrant recommendations that we know we're going to be able to propose to you in April during the warrant review process based on a lower certified free cash number. We'll talk a little later tonight about the snowstorms this weekend and what that means in terms of the current year, which has a direct impact on next year's free cash number. Scott did mention on page 34, we had positive revenue and positive expenditure results. That's also by design. For long, prior to my arrival in Danvers, there's been a disciplined effort by this board and prior boards and the prior town manager to be conservative on the revenue lines that we can, because what's generated at the end of the year there is used to pay for next year's capital improvements. And that's a system that has worked well, but it's a delicate system. You can have a couple of bad winters in a row can really upset that. When you have something like the recession, that can certainly upset that. But we're in a good position right now. We're eager to have the conversation with S&P later this year when we talk about the work we've done to prepare for the Smith School. And then a comment Bill had made regarding the need to be mindful of headcount, and I think that's something we do certainly take seriously. And if you turn to page 135 in one of the statistical supplements to the audit, or the CAFR, you'll see a look over the last 10 fiscal years of full-time employees working for the town, the schools, the library, and the utilities. And when you break out the town employees, meaning general government, public safety, land use, and public works tax, we are actually down 2 positions from where we were a decade ago. So we were at 232 in 2009. We're at 230 in 2018. The growth has been on the school side. And on the utility side, the water and sewer staff is up 1 from where they were a decade ago, and electric is up about 2.5 positions from where they were a decade ago. So this is something we discussed in the fall. It's something, as mentioned, we certainly, when we have retirements or vacancies, we look at how to reallocate those resources to be very mindful of what the headcount is. And it's something that we work pretty hard on to bring to you each year. It's the 14th consecutive year that the town will receive, we've applied, it's the 14th consecutive year we will receive the GFOA award for the excellence in presenting the audit, or the comprehensive annual financial report. And I think that's all that I wanted to add to what Scott
This
said.
is on the town website?
It should be. If it's not, it'll be there tomorrow,
Okay.
as will the draft budget, which you received copies of Friday.
Great. Like I said, I actually like the end of the report that gives a 10-year analysis of where we are in various issues. For example, we're actually, people say we're growing exponentially. on page 133, it just, basically, the population has remained pretty steady. Since 2009, we've only gone up less than 2,000 people, which is pretty amazing. You know, you talk about, we often, I'm sure all of us as selectmen hear about, you know, the growth is out of control, there's no, you know, but to think that we've only got 2,000 more people in 2018 than we had in 2009 is pretty telling. There's some other trending. One of the ones that I'll pitch for Joe and the clerks, actually the collections division, is that we have very, very, very low delinquent tax, and it has fallen steadily over the past 5 years of how much tax delinquency we've had. And the people of Danvers should know that it's, you know, in 2018, it was only 2.32%. Lots of things happen, and there's lots of reasons that someone might be delinquent, and I know that your team always chases it into the next year, and sometimes that offsets things, but it's still a good bellwether of how well we keep an eye on our taxes and tax collection. So I thank you and your team for that. It's also interesting to see on page 128 who the big taxpayers are in town. So I encourage people to get this when it's online. Certainly look at the financial details, but also spin to the back of the book and look at the trending information. I always find that very interesting. Is there any other questions that the board members wish to ask? Seeing none, we want to thank you very much for joining us again this year,
Thank you.
and we'll see you next year.
Thanks. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
This time, the board will hear a second quarter report from the Director of Finance and Administration.
Well, that'll be me tonight. Or,
Corey's better looking.
I'm not sure you're allowed to say that on.
Well, she could do it as well, you know.
So I'll say this, I'm sure I'm not supposed to, but our Director of Finance Administration had in addition to his family a little earlier than he had anticipated, so he's not here tonight.
Oh, nice.
Congratulations.
I think he would have tried to be. I texted him this morning and said, "You're officially banned from the building today. We've got this covered." He said he had
doesn't
his
always
phone
tell
on
us
him, and
to
we
be a
said we won't be
Saturday, though.
contacting him, so. So I know Rodney was hoping to be here tonight to present this, probably in large part because everything is trending the way that we would want it to halfway through the year. If you did receive a very brief cover letter and a spreadsheet showing kind of where we are in all of our major revenue and expenditure lines. The revenue, as it always appears this time of year, is lagging behind the days on the calendar, but that has everything to do with the timing of releases from the state. We're going to meet or exceed most of our revenue lines for the year. Similarly, below, we're on track in all of our expenditure categories. The one note, which is actually the last note on the page related to employee benefits and healthcare, we had to do a budget transfer at last year's town meeting, and we're anticipating needing to do a small transfer at this year's town meeting as well, to fix something that is being proposed. The fix is being proposed in the budget. But in a nutshell, what happened 2 years ago, well, two things really happened. When the prior finance director and I realized some of the healthcare costs had been allocated to the utilities that were more appropriately within the general fund. So we had been transitioning away from that through the budget process. But more importantly, when we made plan design changes to the health plan that the town offers 2 years ago as a way of reducing our renewal, we had anticipated that membership would likely decline by a modest amount. And in fact, what happened that year, because the broader healthcare industry was also experiencing an increase, is that we made our plan more expensive and we actually saw an increase in enrollment on our plan. So the savings that we had been anticipating never materialized in the budget. So for 2 years now, we've been trying to build that back in, and we think the proposed budget that we'll talk about Saturday will make that correction. But that's why at the bottom there, even though we're only 38% expended so far in the year, we'll probably be making a recommendation in May that we move an amount within the budget. I don't think that we'll be exceeding the bottom line of our budget, but certainly we'll have to make a budget transfer at town meeting to address that. Otherwise, there's nothing that stood out to either Joe or Rodney or myself that raised alarms. But I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you have about this. And just as, we typically don't present a quarter one, so this is generally the first quarterly update that we present each year, because after the first quarter, there's very little to report. But certainly quarter two, quarter three, and quarter four are worth reviewing at this level.
So I'll open it up to the board. Does anybody have any questions, or just in general, that you'd like to throw out there?
Well, I think the manager said that snow and ice will be updated after this last storm.
We would prefer he not give a snow report.
I even kept my mouth shut this year.
Please do.
Yeah, can't predict the weather.
He does a pretty good job every year of predicting the weather. I know to put my boots back on.
Yeah.
No luck.
Hearing no questions on this report,
I have a comment.
please, sir.
Haven't had my chance to be down Hanover first yet, but, first of all, I'd like to bring the attention to the fact that our hotel, motel, and meals tax is way above what we may have expected on a yearly basis, and I feel that's very good. It's a clean tax. I consider it a clean tax. It's mostly taxing people who are coming through town, getting a cup of coffee, or sleeping for a night at the hotels, motels, and it doesn't burden our resident taxpayers as much. It's worth about 1% of our total budget. That's good. I was in talking to the building inspector today, and he was raving about, he was so happy that the permit fees are up so much. And I look at this, and it is significant. He didn't expect to see the amount of building that we're going to have on an off year like we've had this year, but that's a pretty significant increase. And again, the investment income where the economy's come, or at least the stock market's come back a bit from last year, has given us another good factor. So those four items are pretty encouraging, that we're making good prognostications as to what our income should be. And again, the expenses, you've done a great job. I guess the regional folks going to cost more money, but it's because there's so many kids who are going to it from Danvers, and that's all, I guess, a wash from the school department budget of some way, but interesting. And thank you for the diligent work of your financial director.
Any other comments? Thank you very much. And please pass along the board's congratulations.
I will do so.
And we'll expect a playpen in here on Saturday. He doesn't get out of Saturday. All right. The board will select a date to close the May 20th, 2019 annual town meeting warrant.
Last year, as is the case this year, the board began its review of the annual warrant the second week in April. So this year, our review of the warrant is scheduled to start on April 16th. And we would recommend closing the warrant on Friday, April 5th at noon, which would be consistent with the closure last year for the prior year warrant. So we're going to start, and I believe it's on the back of your
I didn't see it in the back.
so these were the dates that were approved at we have the finance committee meetings on here, but the regular meeting on April 16th is when the warrant review will begin with the board, so the 16th and the 17th. So this would give us time, if there is a citizen's petition that comes in by that Friday, we would have a chance to get it vetted and reviewed by council in anticipation of the beginning of the review process.
Okay.
So again, that would be April 5th at noon, would be the recommendation we'd make.
Any questions on the recommendation?
April 5th to close the warrant, is that what you said?
At noon, yep.
Thank you.
Any questions? I'll accept a motion.
Move that we accept the recommendation of April 5th to close the warrant.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
I would like to take the opportunity to remind people that citizens' petitions are always welcome, and that the town is willing and able and ready to assist you in the exacting language of a petition. A citizen's warrant is a warrant for a change to zoning or some other effect that is actually legal in nature. And without changing the nature of your petition or your warrant, the town will pass it by council to make sure it meets with the legal guidelines of the town. We have had people come before us in the past who've done their own citizens warrant only to be stymied because it's not written in an exacting manner that the town attorney can certify is appropriate for going to town meeting. So don't feel that we're looking for oversight on your particular warrant article. We're looking to make sure that it goes forward in the most appropriate legal language as can be. So please take your, advantage of that, knowing now that the last date is April 5th. Please, if you have something that you'd like to bring before the board for consideration as part of the warrant, that you do so with enough time that gives our town legal team time to review and help guide you in the appropriate language. Thank you. The town manager report on board to the board, various items of interest. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with one I hadn't been planning to provide, but I took an opportunity to skim the article that Bill handed us at the beginning of the night. Essentially, what it's proposing is something that the governor proposed in the Municipal Modernization Act a couple years ago, and is in a bill that the Mass Municipal Association valiantly and in a spectacular failure proposes each and every year to the legislature, and that is to relinquish control of the liquor licensing process to municipalities. The point made in this article that is rightly made is that the overwhelming majority of petitions from towns and cities to be granted additional licenses are approved at the legislature, and it begs the question why the legislature is involved with the process when they're saying yes to virtually 100% of the requests that are made. Again, that's a request that the Mass Municipal Association makes every single year to the legislature. It's not something that the legislature has been willing to give to release at this point, and it was stripped out of the Municipal Modernization Act that was proposed by Governor Baker during his first term. So I can assure you it will again be a part of the legislative package from the MMA, and we certainly will convey if the board does feel that is something that ought to be handled at the local level instead of the state, then that's an easy message to deliver on that front.
And you now are a member of the Executive Board of MMA, correct?
Correct.
So we have some juice over here to enact it.
It doesn't mean they'll listen to me, but I am on the board.
And I am on the policies committee of the MMA as well. I would also say that this board, has petitioned for more licenses and received them gladly, and I think that the inflated prices are based on obviously supply and demand. And I think that we have increased the point of supply that we actually have available licenses for anybody who would like to come in and petition us for a license. There's no longer a fixed number well, there's a fixed number, but it's so much larger than it had been in the past that I think the days of the $100,000 or $200,000 sales in town are past. So,
Mr. Chairman, are we
Yep.
discussing liquor licenses now?
well, we're discussing, sure.
Oh, well, I wasn't on the agenda, and
No, but it was,
was told earlier that it was going to be maybe a future. Well, I have a few opinions on it. Number one is, as far as people coming in, I think we need to discuss a little bit those liquor licenses in conjunction with the fact that we're rezoning or working on an overlay for downtown, possibly, possibly meeting with Liberty Tree Mall to see what we can do there. That's our number one taxpayer, so I'd always assume that at some point we would have this discussion and do some planning so that we get the best use of it where they are applied to an address. And I will always say that a liquor license that somebody has paid for is an asset. An asset is an asset is an asset, goes on the books, it's recognized by GAAP. And so to say that we're now going to support something, I would want to have some discussion on that, obviously. And through attrition, they will deplete in value, and at some point, they will have a zero value, would be my opinion. But to tell somebody your asset no longer has value would be like walking up to somebody's house and say, you no longer, you just have to give your house away when you're done with it. There's no difference. So I would appreciate it if maybe we had a discussion and did some planning with those. And as far as back in anything, I'm fine with back in the MMA that it come back to us, and that's fine. I mean, that, we don't need to go to the legislature, because we should be able to say, you know what, there's a new area being developed here, we need 3 licenses. I agree with that. We should have total control over that. One of the things that I think we've done a great job on is planning lately, the school systems, now the overlay, and getting our downtown. I think the town's done a great job in being, in planning, and to just tell people come in, I would like to not do that. So that would be my opinion. I'd like to start talking about what we're planning for downtown as we do the overlay, and maybe reserve some licenses. So that's my opinion on the liquor licenses.
Okay, and we can have future discussions about that. Any other comments? Mr. Town Manager? Oh, please,
Just a
go
comment
ahead.
on liquor licenses, if we are commenting on them, reminding you, Salem has gotten a lot of additional licenses recently also, and Salem charges the new people, those new licenses, they have to pay $50,000 apiece, and the person who's in charge of the Chamber of Commerce down there is always giving me a hard time about the fact that we're giving them away here and stripping away the value of the licenses that people paid $100,000, $200,000 for isn't fair. So down there in Salem, their modus operandi is that their 10 or 12, 15 new licenses they have, they charge a fee in addition to the actual annual fee. They charge an initial fee of $50,000 a license in Salem.
So it sounds like there's a lot of discussion on liquor licenses. I'd like to recommend we have an agenda item at the next board meeting to fully vet everybody's ideas and thoughts about liquor licenses in town.
Okay, well, when we're doing, I don't know if that's kind of fast, because we have the budget, but
If it doesn't fit in the next agenda, next meeting will be shortly thereafter.
yeah, whatever you do.
I think we all have different ideas and opinions, and we should throw them on the table and talk about them in a public forum.
I agree.
Okay. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you. We talked briefly about the budget, so you did receive hard copies of the budget message, summary, and the individual department pages on Friday. And that is on the website as of today. So this was a comment, and we thought it was a great comment. We made an effort to get the budget book out earlier this year, so that folks who want to come to the budget workshop on Saturday will have had several days to review that document. So it is on the main page of the website. If you scroll partway down, there's an icon there which includes, one of them is for Smith School, one of them is for the overlay zoning in the downtown, but now the budget should be there as well. As is always the case, no sooner did we print and send out the budget than we started catching minor errors here and there, which does happen in a $150 million budget. None of those changes have affected the bottom line, but we'll be pointing some of those out on Saturday, where we're going to have to make corrections to certain division budgets. So all the departments are working hard to get their presentations ready for you for Saturday. The caterers are ready to have coffee and pastry and lunches, so we can power through the day. And fire will be going first this year, so that's something the chiefs always argue about, but police went first last year, so we'll have fire go first this year. On the personnel front, I'm pleased to inform you, we had a departure several months ago. Chuck Underhill left the electric department. He was our integrated power resource manager. That was a position that was created back in about 2000, in the late 2000s, and it coincided with David Lane's appointment as the utility director, in addition to his role as the public works director. With Chuck's departure, we were able to take that position, and we were able to recalibrate it into an assistant utility director position. So that position will continue to oversee the budget and the power supply in the way that Chuck's position did, but it will also offer some administrative and management support within the electric division, which is something that, since the department was restructured about 5 years ago, is an area that we wanted to bring some additional resources to. So we're very happy that we were able to do that. We had an advertised position. We had a lot of candidates apply, one internal candidate and a host of external candidates, We had a panel that was put together that included a manager from an area municipal light department, so we had an outside utility director serving on an initial panel. We vetted 5 finalists. David Lane and I interviewed the recommended finalists from the panel, and we were thrilled that our internal candidate did emerge as the top candidate for the position. So one of our electrical engineers, Clint Allen, who's been with us for a number of years, decided that he wanted to get on the director track and step forward. He has incredible technical skills. He knows our system inside and out, and he's hungry to become a manager with the organization. So we're really excited that he's accepted that opportunity, and he's going to be given an opportunity to take on some. There's a program. Actually, we'll talk about this on Sunday as well. The MMA and Suffolk University partnered years ago to develop a leadership in local government certificate, which is for $2,500. Individuals who are in municipal government and want to grow into leadership roles have access to 4 graduate level courses through this program, at which point the individual can stop, or they can apply those toward a master's degree if they choose to do that. So we've been very successful. Corey's been accepted into the program. We've had, I want to say to date, probably 7 or 8 employees take advantage of that program, and it's a great program, especially for people like, Clint being a good example of someone who has expressed a desire to sort of step out of a technical role into a more managerial role. No one's asked that question, Diane. I don't know the answer to that. So I'm hoping Clint will be here on Saturday. I'm going to check in with David tomorrow and make sure it's on his calendar, but he's going to be a great fit, and we're very excited to have him step into a new role.
That's who went to Kathy.
On a lighter note, I don't know if you all received the Danvers magazine at home this past week, but there were 3 really nice articles in that magazine. One featured Ron Parsons, who's retiring as our band director this year. Another took a kind of an inside look at the brotherhood that exists within the fire department. I can call it a brotherhood because sadly we don't have any female firefighters. The civil service lists just don't give us candidates, but it was a very nice article that took a look at kind of what happens inside the firehouse, which I think is neat. And then there was a very nice article on Alex Glent and what's happening in the library. So it's a great publication, and this one was really nice for us to see because it really focused on 3 different aspects of local government. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the town clerk to provide an election update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As you know, our annual town election is on Tuesday, May 7th, and nomination papers are available, and the deadline for filing the nomination papers is March 26th. We are in need of some town meeting candidates from the various precincts, and if you don't mind, I could list off. There's 6 for 3 years in Precinct 1. We have 4 currently running.
So we need 2.
You missed housing as well.
Yeah, excuse me, thank you. The Housing Authority, there's a 5-year term, and we have no one currently running. Precinct 2, 6 to be elected for 3 years. We only have 2 indicating that they want to run at this point. We have 1 for a 2-year term. We do have that filled currently. Not to say someone else could take out that paper. Precinct 3 for the 3-year term. We only have 1 of the 6 to be elected, pulling papers so far. Precinct 4 is lively, and we have more than enough people running for the 3-year term in Precinct 4. And we also have a 1-year term in Precinct 4, and we have 2 currently running. Let's see. Precinct 5, we have 6 running for the 3-year spots. In a 2-year term, we have 2, and we do have 2 running. Precinct 6, we have 3 out of the 6 running. And for a 2-year term, we have 1 to be elected. There is 1 currently running. For Precinct 7, for the 6 to be elected for 3 years. We do currently have 6 candidates. And in Precinct 8, for the 6 for the 3-year term, we currently have 5 running, and there's 2 for 2-year term. We have 1 running, so there is we are lacking a candidate there. As I said earlier, nomination papers are currently available, and the deadline for filing these papers is 5 o'clock on March 26th.
Thank you. All right. Any other updates, Mr. Town Manager?
That's it, thank you.
All right, at this time, I'll move to the consent calendar.
Actually, I'm sorry, I did
Please.
bring one more that I didn't write down, although you probably don't want to hear about it, and that's the storm that we had this
All
past
right.
weekend. So, we had the official mark was 12 inches. And we're about 69% expended on our snow budget for the year. So
That's after the storm or before?
that's including the storm.
Oh, really? I thought
Yeah,
it was that much.
it had been we had a lot of very small storms so far
just-
this year.
just ice,
So 4 inches, yeah, ice, a lot of pre-treating, 1 inch, 3 inch storms that required the crews to be out there but weren't significant snow events.
What's the total snow accumulation this year?
39 inches so far.
Thank you.
So we're, like I said, we're, I'm gonna knock on the desk here, but we're 16.
Don't say it.
Yep.
Don't say it.
So that's where we are. It was a big storm, and I will say this, tremendous job by the crews. We had, we were able to open Town Hall at 10 o'clock. The schools were closed, but the crews did a great job keeping the roads open. They got some rest and then opened up the sidewalks and the parking lots. It had I intercepted or was copied on a very nice note from the library director to DPW. They had opened the next day when a lot of their counterparts stayed closed all day, and he didn't get a single comment on any of the sidewalks or the parking lots, so that they do a great job. I mean, that's not a surprise to anybody here. Had a particularly nice note come across my desk today, and I won't name the employee, but we had an employee in our Public Works Department who was out as part of the crews and observed an injury occur. A resident was operating a snowblower and became injured. And he got out of the car and he assisted getting these kids to the next door neighbor's house so that the wife could attend to the husband and make sure that he got medical treatment. And he was willing to stay there and make sure that the 911 was contacted and that it was handled appropriately. And the family reached out and couldn't say enough about the attention that this Public Works employee provided in what was a really trying situation. So we certainly do get complaints about mailboxes and sidewalk cutouts and things like that. But on the whole, I think that the crews do a nice job.
While we're on the subject of snow, a couple of things. One is I've been very appreciative of the fact that DPW has been posting on social media right away about parking bans and about trash pickup. Those are the two big things I hear about when a storm occurs. It's Monday, yes, we saw the parking ban, but are they gonna pick up my trash? And they're very proactive about posting that. I also saw that the local firefighters union posted about clearing hydrants to remind people, and some people have been posting their pictures of clear hydrants. And I actually I posted one for across the street from me, but suggested they might run a contest where if you post a clear hydrant picture, maybe you win a ride in the truck, the new truck that comes through. So just to remind people that clearing the hydrants is really important, especially after the plowing is complete. They kind of know where everyone is. I know they have a very detailed map, but even knowing where it is, it makes it difficult if they have to try to clear the snow away from it to get to the hydrant when needed. So pitch for that. Anything else, Mr. Town Manager?
That's
Well, I
it.
want to tell you that I opened on time and have people coming from all over, and every one of them said, it's amazing once you hit Danvers. That's what I heard all day Monday. It's just amazing. I was out at 5:30 in the morning and can tell you that Cabot and Maple were clear, so didn't realize it was going to be that bad because I didn't pay attention. But Danvers was great. As soon as I hit Route 1, though, into Peabody, I got to tell you, it was a little different, so. But I heard it all day. It was amazing how, once you cross into Danvers, so. I hear that all the time, but I thought you'd like to know.
I heard it today in the bank. woman that was my teller lives in Marblehead, and of course Marblehead that doesn't use salt in their streets, they just use sand.
Yeah.
And she said, so they went from the Outback, they went through Salem, which was a mess, and she said she couldn't believe, after they got through Peabody, they came to Danvers with bare pavement. She just couldn't believe it, and I know there's a great deal of pride taken about it. I don't like to see all the salt we use, but this was an excellent storm to show that pre-treatment worked beautifully, because it never stuck to the pavement, and they were able to get it right off, nice and easy.
All right. Nothing else, I'll start with the consent calendar, please.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We'll move to correspondence, selectmen new business, previous new public business updates, and selectmen's closing comments. Mr. Clark, would you start us off, sir?
Okay, I just got one little minor thing in light of the fact that we had the storm, and in light of the fact that some of the boards have already been pulled out of the meadow, it might be time to turn off the lights down there and not have them on, because there's not going to be any more skating the rest of the year.
Anything else, sir?
Not really. Great job on the storm. Chucky and his crew should be commended.
Mr. Mills?
Nothing really new, but lots of comments to me from people my age and older, old-time Danvers residents, who are concerned that we be very careful about spending their money. They remind us that they're all on fixed income, limited budgets, and it seems as though they believe that their cost of government goes up faster than any increase they get in their pensions.
Thank you. Selectman Reynolds. Diane?
No, I said my piece about the liquor.
Couple of things outstanding or old business. Could we get a report at our next meeting regarding the dispensation of the dog issue? Make sure all the conditions we set forward were reviewed and accepted. Also, after budget season, one of the things I had mentioned at the beginning of the year that I'd like to see is the opportunity for boards and commissions to come before us and present the work they're doing. For example, the Airport Commission or some of the others that may not get the press that they normally do, as they might get with MLK Day or some other event that they sponsor, but that the volunteers to the town, Cable Commission, all the others, should be recognized for the work they do behind the scenes. And I think even if it's a just brief, what are you up to, what are you presenting, what are you doing, give them the opportunity to tell the selectmen, especially those that don't have selectmen representation on them, to give them a little spotlight, as it were. Other than that, I don't have anything, and so I will turn to Selectman Bennett. Yes.
Would you let me just say one other thing? I just was commiserating with my colleague Diane. It really troubles me that there are so many vacancies in the town meeting and people not taking out their papers to run. I want to say that the town meeting is very important, but it isn't the worst heavy lifting in the town. Because we are so well organized, I think, the materials that town meeting members are asked to vote upon are really put out clearly, weeks, sometimes months before the meeting. So it isn't like you have to devote, half a lifetime to the job. The job is very important, and it scares me that there aren't, we have so many wonderful applications for people who want to be appointed to boards in the town, and we have great people coming forward. But I wish, if you're sitting out there tonight and wondering, what it's all about, it's not that complicated, and it can be a wonderful experience, and it is essential to us functioning as a town, that we have a town meeting body. So I hope that some people out there will talk to Joe Collins, take out some papers, and consider running for maybe some of them uncontested seats that you just have to file your papers and you're going to be a town meeting member. Please consider it. Thank you.
I just want to add to that, David, that they should realize it only takes 10 signatures from their precinct, so it isn't that hard to go out and get, if you've got a few friends, you can go down to the coffee shop and get your signatures usually that you need. One thing I failed to say earlier, I want to commend Steve on something that he started new, and that is the interdepartmental newsletter that I saw a copy of floating around. I think that's a good move for communications among the town departments and employees, and good idea, Steve, and congratulations for doing something like that.
Well, I'd say kudos to the employees. Something we started last year, every other Friday or so, I have a coffee with 8 or 10 employees from across all the departments. So we have people in each department who make a concerted effort to make sure that we have a good mix of employees from, each week we'll have someone from police and fire and engineering and the town hall and the treatment plant and the senior center. And it's just a chance to get together and meet other employees. And some of the feedback and some of the comments have been really neat to see. We've had employees who have been exchanging emails with each other for 8 years and had never put eyes on the other person. And so they had a cup of coffee together and some really interesting connections made. But one of the consistent themes from those coffees is that folks have a really good idea and a really high level of confidence in the work that the person next to them is doing. But they've never been to the treatment plant. Some are surprised to find out it's in Middleton and not in Danvers. And so the update, this was the first, and it'll be refined each time we do it, is a chance where they say, we'd really like to know more about what's going on in these other departments. So I'm glad I decided to share a copy of the board so you could see, and I'll probably make a habit of that. But it's something the employees asked for, and I think it's a good move, and hopefully we've had some great feedback already on it, and so we'll tweak it each time to make it more relevant to them.
And I'm just wondering, is it the kind, I read it, it was wonderful, and I should have, maybe I responded. Is it the kind of thing that could go on the town's website so that citizens in general can have a better sense of what is going on?
It's really not the intended purpose of that.
No, I know it wasn't the
But
intended purpose.
I think
Okay.
I'd like to share it with the board so you can have informed conversations with folks, but a lot of that is meant for the employees to know what's going on in their lives. Some of them are personal updates from an employee's perspective, so.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
Oh, thank you. So besides thanking a vet when you see them, we all should consider the needs of a returning vet when they come back. And as a community, as a state, and as a government, we should do all we can to help support them mainstream back into their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. If you don't mind, on that subject, just a reminder that Operation Troop Support is hosting Blues for the Troops. It's a musical venue that they've been doing for many, many years. It'll be on May 5th at the August P. Gardner AmVets in Middleton, and encourage people to go. There's raffles, you get to see a day of great music by bands that donate their time and support the cause as well. So that's a support of Operation Troop Support.
Great.
If you don't mind.
Nope.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Danvers. Have a good night.
All right.
See you all on Saturday. Casual, dress comfortable. We're going to be here all day.
There's
Oh,
this
yeah,
casual.
all the at-large positions.
Not just
on the
casual.